Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns, and as everyone is aware, and I told you in a previous feature, we normally track auctioneer corruption and cronyism on an entirely separate website, auctioneer-la.org. That's auctioneer-la.org, and I'm going to provide you a link to that page. It'd be something to bookmark if you have any interest in the auction business or any perceived chance that you may go to an auction or consign merchandise to be auctioned. The page I'm going to provide for you, the web page, it's going to list the individual auctioneers and the problems that they have encountered in the state of Louisiana. But the reason I'm doing this on our main sound off feature is because today I want to focus in on one auctioneer in particular that is having significant problems, at present day problems, and that would be Mr. Jeff Henderson. Jeff is a member of the Louisiana Auctioneers Licensing Board. Governor Jindal appointed him to that board, notwithstanding the fact that Jindal's own revenue secretary was asserting at the time by way of a lawsuit that Henderson Auctions owed over $200,000 in unpaid sales taxes. Nevertheless, Jeff Henderson was placed onto the Auctioneer Licensing Board. Now let me just say this, and if you look back in the file, you see where the state of Mississippi also alleged that there was $400,000 in unpaid sales taxes over in Mississippi, and they recorded such as a judgment in 21st Judicial District Court. That's all available if you click on Marvin Henderson as the auctioneer there, because Marvin basically is always touted that, hey, he runs everything. And that goes to the core issue at hand. Now, why is Jeff Henderson on the board rather than Marvin himself? Well, Marvin had a felony conviction entailing mail fraud some years back, and of course there's always a reluctance to put someone on a board that you know, is a past convicted felon. I might just, you know, as a parenthetical disclosure, point out that Governor John Bel Edwards now has two folk that are sons of prior convicted felons. But let me just say this. Jeff Henderson finds himself in one hell of a quagmire now because, and I'm going to briefly bring you up to speed. I'm going to give a link that will give you far more detail if you want to go back and watch previous videos. But Henderson Auctions became involved in a transaction for the sale of a casino boat. Basically there was put $550,000, give or take, put up for it. Well, they actually said $600,000, but you know, what's $35,000, $40,000 amongst friends on a transaction like this? They asserted that they put another $300,000 into bringing the boat up to speed for sale, storage costs, things of this nature. And so they tried to auction the boat. Well, the auction was a flop, and so they had to go into negotiated sale mode. They were in partnership, by the way, on this with a gentleman named Blake Everett. Blake Everett. All right, and so when the unsuccessful auction took place, they went into negotiated sale mode. They found well, first the boat was transferred into an LLC controlled by Blake Everett exclusively, and then there was an understanding that, okay, we have found a buyer for this boat. It was a gentleman named Dr. Rhodes. It was purported that he put up $350,000 cash and also gave title to a property in Kosciuszko, Mississippi by the name of the Ivy House. And so, long story short, Henderson's made the allegation that Blake was keeping this thing exclusively in his name, and he was going to sell the thing, both the house and its contents, and keep the money and put Mr. Henderson out of the loop. Now, the property, when it was closed upon, Marvin was there at the closing, and Marvin has been, according to pleadings that have been put out, has been in every transaction entailing this particular deal that they were in together. Nevertheless, Marvin and Jeff were not pleased that all this was going on, so they got a temporary restraining order, blocked the sale up in Mississippi, dragged on for about 15 months. Ultimately, the court up there said, hey, you being Henderson Auctions, you can't substantiate that you have any interest in this house. I am going to remove the lis pendens that was filed. Now, for those of you not in the real estate profession, a lis pendens is basically a filing that says, hey, we have either filed litigation with regard to this, or we will imminently plan to file litigation with regard to this. So they were able to block the sale for about a year, or any sale of it for about a year. What had happened, Blake had gotten a company in Mississippi to look at auctioning, Clark Auctions. Nick Clark was the auctioneer. But at any rate, Marvin filed a, well, I'll say Marvin. Bear in mind, I'm always going to say Marvin because I'm used to saying it, because he makes no secret of the fact that, hey, I am Henderson Auctions, although we're going to get to something that's going to be very interesting in just a moment. But at any rate, they got wind of this, and so they filed a temporary restraining order. They filed the lis pendens, but also Marvin also filed litigation, or Henderson Auctions filed litigation in Livingston Parish. As I have explained to you in a previous video, that's where they would want to file it, because Henderson has bragged, Marvin that is, that, hey, with regard to those sales taxes they said that they owed, Marvin, I've got him on video saying, the Department of Revenue doesn't want to take me on in Livingston Parish. I wish they'd come on, but they ain't got guts enough to take me on in Livingston Parish. All right, well, the litigation in Livingston Parish was against Blake Everett, alleging a number of things, fraudulent misrepresentation, things of this nature. Ultimately, Blake got a pretty darn good attorney out of Covington, and he transferred the matter to federal court, and that's where it's been since about January of this year. But as you saw the headline, it said that Jeff Henderson has been backed into suing his own dad. And that's what we're going to talk about for this particular segment. I realize I covered that rather hurriedly, but I know people won't watch videos forever, and so if you want more detail, go back and look at some of the previous videos of what all happened in this. You're welcome to do so. But I want to talk about the attorney that Blake retained in Covington that has now basically caused Jeff Henderson, his son, and by the way, Jeff is basically a figurehead. All through the pleadings of all this, there's never any indication that Jeff participated in any kind of dealing whatsoever in this. Everything was Marvin, but at any rate, Jeff is the official. Jeff and his sister Janet Cagley are the two official owners of Henderson Auctions. Now, we talked, in the headline it said Jeff Henderson has been backed into suing his own father. Let's talk about that for a moment, and we're going to give you the link for Marvin being added as a third-party defendant in this litigation, and why he was able to be pursued for that. And I'm going to give you the full link for the third-party defendant edition of Marvin Henderson. We're going to give you the link for the servicing. The service is still in process, right? As of now, there's no evidence that Marvin has been served with the lawsuit. He may be making himself a little scarce. I don't know, as it was filed over a month ago, and at least at this point, there's no evidence of return service in the file. But let's talk about that. In the lawsuit, and I'm also going to give you a link for just some highlighted portions that I find really, really interesting, and I believe that you will too, but we're also going to give you the link for the full third party, excuse me. And so if you look at the top of page 2, it says, and I've highlighted it, Marvin Henderson declares and states, quote, I am not a shareholder or officer of JAH Enterprises, Inc. And that is an interesting contention because, as Blake's attorney will point out, that's funny, you have touted yourself as the chief executive officer on the Henderson Auction website. And we're going to give you a link for this particular screenshot. You'll see it very clearly saying Marvin Henderson, chief executive officer of the company, which is interesting that he would now assert that he is not a shareholder, nor is he an officer of JAH Enterprises. Now, if you go down a little bit further, when they talk about alleging fraud on the part of Mr. Henderson, it says, and I'm quoting now from paragraph 6, Marvin Henderson intentionally and knowingly defrauded BLH, that's Blake's company, by representing that he was negotiating on behalf of and directing the payment of funds to himself personally or to his designees on behalf of JAH, when he in fact signed a declaration denying that he is even an officer or shareholder of JAH. Let's look on at paragraph 7. JAH now claims that A, Marvin Henderson was not a stockholder. JAH is Jeffrey Henderson. That is when you hear JAH, think Henderson Auctions, because that's what it is. It's JAH DBA Henderson Auctions. JAH now claims, number A, Marvin Henderson was not a stockholder or an officer of JAH We just showed you the screenshot of him showing it. And by the way, while I'm discussing that, there's also, even on the website today, which has been screen saved, there's a little profile and background on Janet Cagley. That would be the daughter. And toward the end of her profile, it says, and I'm quoting now, and this was on the website as of moments ago when I just printed this out, and I'm highlighted, it says, Janet collaborates with her father, that would be Marvin, and brother to plan auctions, set dates, determine budgets for all aspects of the business. That would be ironic to do such collaboration with someone who you state is not an officer and has no interest in the company. All righty. Part B, JAH knew nothing. This is what is being alleged in pleadings that have now been filed by JAH. It's saying that JAH knew nothing of Marvin Henderson's actions in connection with the closing of the sale of the MB Crown Casino. And that's basically goes to the crux of what Blake's attorney has said is, okay, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you're going to assert that this man has nothing to do with Henderson auctions, then never mind that you let him sign documents binding this company. He's been out there purporting that he is the chief executive officer. If that's the story you want to tell now, that Blake Everett knew Marvin had nothing to do with Henderson auctions, fine. Then that means that you want to assert that my client has defrauded you, your own father, all right, would also be a defendant. If that's what you want to assert, that he had nothing to do with this company, then, why did you let him, and it's an interesting question for Jeff Henderson, why did you stand by and let Marvin Henderson execute documents if you say he had nothing to do with the company? And I'm going to tell you, that would be an auction statute violation if you're knowingly just sitting idly by and letting someone who has nothing to do with your company sign these documents. Wow. It would be interesting to see Jacob Warren, the new chairman. It'd be interesting to see if he has an interest in that and may choose to act upon it. And by the way, Jacob Warren, the new chairman of the LALB, y'all have to forgive me. In meetings, I'm going to refer to him as Mr. Warren. As we have these videos, I'm going to refer to him as Home Slice. All right, and the reason for that is he's from Amite. He's 31 years old, and John Bell Edwards is also from Amite. And of course, by default, a 31-year-old is certainly going to go in as chairman of this LALB because, well, that's the way things are done. And so I'm going to, all tongue-in-cheek, enjoying this, of course, as I'm sure Mr. Warren does. He will be referred to as Home Slice. Now, I will point out that for the first LALB meeting, he had to have everything scripted for him. Apparently, he's never been in any kind of a professional meeting, and Sandy Edmonds had to literally script everything for him, right down to ask for a first, ask for a second, hit gavel, any discussion. So this is going to be real interesting because he's going to have to get up to speed pretty fast. All right, let's look at paragraph 8. Marvin Henderson negotiated and signed on behalf of JAH in all dealings with Blake. The attached joint venture agreement executed on behalf of JAH is executed by Marvin Henderson. The notarized bill of sale on the MV Crown Casino is executed by Marvin Henderson as sellers, a person signing on behalf of sellers. Let's look at paragraph 9. BLH has not had a meeting with JAH without Marvin Henderson being present or part of the negotiations, and that would include the closing on the Ivy House that I mentioned to you earlier. Marvin Henderson was listed as Chief Executive Officer on the webpage until after BLH filed its counterclaim, which is shown on the screenshot. I've gone ahead and put it in front of the camera, but we will provide you the link for this screenshot of them openly touting being the chief executive officer. But they did pull that down once Blake filed this counterclaim. How interesting. Let's skip on down to paragraph 12. Marvin Henderson's actions and conduct constitute a breach of the covenant of good faith and fair dealing. Now, let's skip on down to I'm on page 4 now. Let's skip on down to paragraph 15. Marvin Henderson has intentionally, wrongfully, and with malice and without justification tortuously interfered with the contractual rights and the economic advantages of BLH by misleading BLH as to the proper payment of the money received from the sale of the moving vessel Crown Casino and as to the agreement concerning the Ivy House. And then they concluded up paragraph 16, BLH has been damaged by Marvin Henderson's wrongful and tortuous conduct. That was the justification for adding Marvin Henderson individually as a defendant, which in essence means that Jeff Henderson, the board member, is now having to sue his own father. He's been backed into that. But I want to focus now before we wrap this video up, because I did not want to take an inordinate amount of time, because I know people will not watch videos ad infinitum. Let's look at how JAH responded. They basically had to refile their entire claim. I mean, Janet Henderson readily admitted in an affidavit she did not know that her father got $110,000 out of the closing proceeds that was wired to him. They just thought, oh, well, you got $460,000. We only heard about $350. Where'd the other $110 go? And so they, bear in mind, they didn't know. They didn't even know the other $110 existed when they first filed the first lawsuit on that. Now they've come to find out that, oh, there was another $110. Where the hell did it go? Oh, it went to Daddy. Mr. Blake, bad boy, you gave $110,000 to our father without our knowledge of it. How dare you, somebody that has nothing to do with Henderson Auctions in no way. Never mind, this chief executive officer, never mind that we're going to give you a link to show you Keith Babb inducting Marvin Henderson into the Hall of Fame. And you can watch that video. Who is it up there at the stand that's accepting all these accolades? It's not Jeff Henderson. It's not Janet Cagley. It's Marvin Henderson. Now, he does have his family members over to the side, but he makes it very clear who's running the show. We can also, let me throw in another video link. We're going to give you a link for our folk testifying at the House, including Marvin, the most prominent testifier, with regard to shield bidding. It's an illegal practice in Louisiana, and you'll see Marvin Henderson defending the practice and readily admitting that hey, you enforce this, and I'm just going to put my company out of business. All right. So we'll give you that link as well. But the point is, he makes it very clear. I'm Marvin Henderson of Henderson Auctions. Okay. You're chief executive officer, you know, and make no integration to the contract until it becomes convenient to then say, hey, I don't have anything to do with this company. Wow, what an interesting contention. All right, let's talk about the revisions made in the original lawsuit, which they had to completely refile on March the 31st in light of this business of Marvin being basically dragged in as a third-party defendant, which, like I said, basically means that Jeffrey Henderson is now, for all intents and purposes, suing his own father. I want to focus in on paragraph 17. I'll give you the link for the entirety of the revised lawsuit, but I've got certain parts highlighted because I feel they're the most compelling. Let's read paragraph 17. Now, this is the filings that have been made by JAH Enterprises in light of learning that their own father is being served as a defendant in this whole litigation. Paragraph 17, on December 3rd, 2013, Dr. Rhodes, he's a veterinary clinic. He owns a veterinary clinic. Remember, he is the one who bought the Moving Vessel Crown Casino. On December 3rd, 2013, Dr. Rhodes wired $461,091 to BLH Equipment. This account, Citizens National Bank in Mississippi. The very next day, BLH, that's Blake, BLH Equipment wired only $340,000 to Henderson Auctions. BLH Equipment has filed pleadings in which it conceded that it, or Blake, are, quote, carved off, unquote, the additional $111,000 and split that portion of the cash among themselves and Marvin Henderson. These defendants knew that Marvin Henderson had no ownership in JAH Enterprises at the time, and nevertheless they failed to disclose the true facts of the transaction with Dr. Rhodes or the alleged deal with Marvin Henderson to Janet and Jeff Henderson. Let's continue on to paragraph 24. I think you're finding it pretty interesting. Let's go on to paragraph 24. The defendants, acting in concert, convinced the auction house. Oh, by the way, Nick Clark has now been dragged into the litigation. Forgot to mention that. Nick Clark, the guy that was to conduct the auction of the Ivy House, they've now, decided, hey, we're going to drag this old boy into the lawsuit too. Paragraph 24. The defendants, acting in concert, convinced the auction house, Nick Clark Auctions, to pay $4,000 as an advance to the defendants, and then to turn over the remainder of the auction proceeds, which is represented to be $29,000, to the defendants without notifying Henderson Auctions. Nick Clark Auctions was in breach of its obligation to Henderson Auctions by agreeing to the sale of the movables from the Ivy House because, among other things, it knew or should have known that Henderson Auctions had an interest in the property. I'd like to know how. How would he even have known that? And also because the Ivy House would have been sold for a higher price if it was furnished with the antiques. By allowing the auction of the contents alone, Nick Clark Auctions greatly devalued the remaining asset, the Ivy House, in an amount that exceeds $75,000 exclusive of interest or attorney's fees. Now, why are they having to allege that? Well, it's because $75,000 is the cutoff point about whether or not you can even try this litigation in federal court as it pertains to Nick Clark. So what they're basically going to say is, hey, we realize you only got $29,000 for the contents, okay? We acknowledge that. We're basically going to say you are a boneheaded idiot auctioneer, and if you had let those contents remain in the home, it would have brought so much more money that that would have been at least $75,000. I'm not going to comment on the logic of that because, well, I'll just leave it at that. I find it very interesting. Having been an auctioneer for a decade, of course, I'm one that Mr. Henderson and some others would say I don't know anything. Well, I'm okay, that's well and good. I know one thing. Well, we'll get to that in just a second. Look at paragraph 25. It says that Henderson Auctions, excuse me, they're talking about there was a retention of $110,000 in funds over and above the $340,000 that was wired to Henderson Auctions as the sales price to Dr. Rhodes. That's in paragraph 25. I hand wrote a notation out there that that money was wired to Marvin Henderson personally. And that's been asserted in pleadings previously. So let's skip on down to right near the end of paragraph 27 where it says Henderson Auctions is carrying approximately $720,000. Presumably that would be in debt. They don't put the word debt in there. But Henderson Auctions is carrying approximately $720,000 on the casino vessel Ivy House transaction as of 2016. Now, let me just say this in wrapping this video up. If that's accurate, and you're now asserting, and that's just the pleading, I read from their pleading, you know, if you now owe $720,000 on a vessel that you no longer have, that being Jeff Henderson, the member of the Auctioneers Licensing Board, if that is accurate, and you now are saying you have $720,000 on a boat that you no longer have, then I would state that that falls under the category of suffering from a terminal case of the dumbass, okay? I don't know any other way to phrase it, all right? If that's accurate, and it's in the pleadings, you know, I guess we're talking about, I don't know, probably $70,000 a year interest, perhaps. Divide that by 12, yeah, we're talking about quite a bit of money, $6,000 to $7,000 of interest. How in the hell did you manage to let a boat disappear? I mean, here's one other thing. How about having, you know, as most of you know, I was a federal fraud examiner for banks for some 5 or 6 years in the early 90s. They're asserting that this is a line of credit that they drew on, so there was no specific collateral interest in the boat. Well, you know, maybe a good idea would have been to have an actual security agreement executed on all this, such that the bank never would have let you turn it loose without the pay down, okay? But, you know, when you got all this wheeler dealing going on, I find it amazing that basically what you're saying is, I allowed a boat to be put in another gentleman's name for which my father executed the sale to that name. Of course, now I'm going to assert my father has nothing to do with the company. And then in subsequent transactions, we'll admit we got $340,000. My father got another $110,000. I didn't know about it. You never should have let all this happen, because you know my father has nothing to do with this company. He doesn't own it. He's not a direct. You know, I'm keeping from laughing. It's difficult, but I am. You know, and so now it's saying, well, we're up to $720,000 that we owe on this boat, and it's gone. You know, how did you let all that happen? How in the hell did a member of the Auctioneers Licensing Board how did all this happen? And this is the gentleman that wanted to spearhead reinstituting continuing education, which, by the way, I think is a great idea. All right? But I got a real problem with continuing education being conducted at the Louisiana Auctioneers Association. These folks are high up in the LAA. All right? Maybe they could be utilized to instruct you what you should not do. Okay? But by producing these videos of these auctioneers have gotten themselves in messes, we're providing the best possible continuing education. Now that's going to wrap up this video. As you can tell, it is extremely interesting on these latest developments involving LALB board member Jeff Henderson, whom I might add, Governor John Bell Honor Code Edwards has reappointed to the LALB. And I want to say one last thing. I know what everybody's waiting on. You're waiting on the behind the scenes, what all went on in the Freddie Phillips ouster, Darlene Jacobs shuffle that went on. And, you know, I'm just going to let you know right now, there will be a new moniker for John Bell Edwards. You may as well get ready for it, and it's going to go like this. It's not going to be John Bell Honor Code Edwards. His new moniker that will go up on the JBE Fraud website is Mr. John Bell Liar, Pants on Fire Edwards. And I'm letting you know that in advance. And if you know anything about me, I don't make that kind of a claim when I can't back it up. All right? And one of the reasons it takes a while for me to get video presentations out there is because I make sure I'm darn thorough in my research and in my documentation to back up what I say. So take it to the bank. You're going to find the next episode quite interesting as we reveal what all went on in that Phillips-Jacobs shuffle that can now make them moniker John Bell Liar, Pants on Fire Edwards be apropos. Thank you so much. Look forward to bringing you the next episode. I hope everyone is looking forward to their summer vacation and you know, July the 4th holiday, which is just upon us. Thank you so much for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you next time.